Good evening and good morning, depending where you're joining us from. It's great to be with you. Thank you for taking time. My name is Jim Sutter, and I'm the CEO of the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and I'm your host today. And we've got some special guests, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes, but they're going to really help shed some good insight into the report that came out last Friday. But first, let me make just a few comments to try and set the stage. I've been traveling a lot over the last couple of months and to continue to talk about the 4 C's that have most impacted businesses during the past 12 months: COVID, climate, conflict, and currency. But in getting out and talking with leaders, whether it be at the Consumer Goods Forum, the IGC, or the FEFAC conferences, a Right to Protein event in Nigeria, or a special event with leaders in Latin America, I'm reminded that the 5th C that I added, collaboration, is a great opportunity as well as something that's essential as our collective industry continues to face challenges in the world today. And as we analyze these stocks and acreage numbers that were released last Friday by the USDA, it's important to take a step back, reflect, and try and see the forest from the trees. Because I know these numbers created a surprise in the short term, but the U.S. industry's vision to support our global stakeholders' efforts to provide global nutrition in many different forms, and to do this with climate-smart, sustainable U.S. soy grown by our farmers and made available through our world-class export supply chain, is alive and well. It has been and continues to be the top priority for our industry. U.S. soy, the product and all the services that USEC provides, support progress for people and communities around the world. Our team of USEC staff members and our volunteers are excited to get involved in conversations and collaborations on nutrition security, environmental sustainability, economic growth, and all with the aim of improving the efficient supply of high-quality products from U.S. soy for consumption in a wide variety of applications, including human consumption, aquaculture, and livestock uses. We want to help you be successful in your business. That's our whole aim with all of the things that we do. So also, in all of my travels and in the roughly 10 years I've been doing this job, the 2 things we have in common is that we all need to eat. It's core to our survival. And we all want choice. Every farmer, no matter where in the world, should at very least have those 2 fundamentals. And our Right to Protein campaigns help to build awareness of this need and opportunity. The work that each of you do is important in enabling food security. Whether you're trading, buying, selling, formulating rations, developing a new product, raising livestock, you're contributing to local food and nutrition security. You've done a great job of it through the challenges of the last few years, and I'm sure you will continue to do it very well in the future, and we want to be there to help you. Success at the local level enables global food and nutrition security, and your work matters, and we thank you for the opportunity to collaborate with you. So let's get on now and talk about today's session. It's a good example of how global things impact local solutions. I mean, all of you are interested in hearing about the U.S. soy crop situation and how it's going to impact the global supply and demand, because ultimately, that will impact the local situation in your own countries. With that in mind, I want to introduce our expert guests. First, we have the president of Pro Exporter, Marty Ruica. He's going to give us a quick overview of USDA's acreage and stock report, and then we're going to get into a discussion on how trade is responding and what this means for the feed and food sectors in regards to the global soy complex, the global soy supply and demand. Then later, I'll be pleased to welcome 2 of our U.S. soy farmers, Stan Bourne from Illinois and Mike McCraney from South Dakota. But you'll get to meet those in just a few minutes. And always, if you have a question, please type it into our Q&A box. We'll do our best to get it answered today on our webinar, or we'll get back to you in any case with a response. But please put your questions in. That'll make it more relevant for everybody. So now let's move to the numbers, what you really want to hear about. I am going to turn it over to Marty. Go ahead, take it away, Marty.
Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go over some of the numbers from the crop report. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this middle column here. It's the total major row crops for the United States. You can see that in the crop report, that's adding up to 255 million acres. I consider 255 million acres to mean that we're very completely planted this year. We've had very good planting weather, and so we're not going to have a very big prevented plant number. New in the last year are these three columns on the right that show the prevented plant acres that we have and the total land base that is available for crops, hay, and pasture with the prevented plant added in. You can see last year we had 5 million acres of prevented plant. If you take that and add it to the 251 of all planted row crops last year, that puts you right at about 256. And you can see at 255, we're very close to that. So part of the surprise that we had on Friday, some people, immediately think, well, is there a prevented plant issue? We do not think there's a prevented plant issue for this year. When you look at the total of corn plus soy, we use this column in the very middle a lot, especially in our 10-year forecasting called the blue sky model. The max for corn and soy in the US is about 180 million acres. It's really, really hard for us to get over that number ever. You can see this year, it looks like we're at 177.6 million acres. So that's pretty close to our max. And one of the reasons why that number's maybe not bigger is that wheat has had a really good year. You can see over here on the second column from the left, all wheat. Wheat is at 50 million acres, and that's up 4.2 from the previous year. So that kind of explains why corn and soy was not able to get back to 180 million acres. Next year, maybe that will be a different case, but these are the numbers we have for now. If we look at where these changes in planting acres occurred, you can see that soybean acres went up in South Dakota. They went up in Minnesota. That's because of prevented plant last year. But in almost all other states, they went down. So something unique is going on with respect to soybean acres. We're going to look at the same chart for corn. And you can see almost the exact opposite. Corn is up in almost all of the Corn Belt states by a pretty big number. And when you get a chance to study these, you can see that the amount that soybean acres are down is slightly less than the amount that corn acres is up. So something else is going on, and I think it's in these wheat numbers. So if you combine the increase in wheat acres plus the increase in corn acres, particularly in the Corn Belt states, you get very close to the amount of acres that soybeans are down. So let's, before we go on, let's talk a little bit about why maybe that occurred this year. We had perfect planting weather in the Corn Belt for all Corn Belt states except North Dakota. And North Dakota, finally, at the very end of the primary planting season, weather turned good and they were able to get their crop in. In the US, and this Jim mentioned, about the global outlook versus maybe the local outlook. And so when I say local, I really mean the US. What's unique about the US in this regard? When US farmers have perfect planting weather, they will tend to plant more corn because the upside potential in corn yield is quite significant. It can be the surprise above trend, if everything's good, can be maybe plus 30 bushels per acre. We do get sometimes upside surprises in soybeans, but it would be more like an additional 5 bushels or so per acre. And when you look at the dollar value of that on a per acre basis, when things are really good for corn, we're going to get a lot of corn acres. On the contrary, if there's difficulty getting the corn crop planted, you're going to see more soybean acres. And that, helps explain some of the uniqueness of this year. Our soybean yield trend that the USDA has is still 52.7. We'll be getting a WSDA report in early July here, where we'll see if we're still on track for that. And we'll also get to see how the WSDA team adjusts to this new acreage information that we have. So this is a provisional U.S. soybean supply demand table. What I mean by provisional is normally during the beginning of the year, we do not publish a separate set of statistics from the USDA. We adopt the USDA numbers, but we don't have an updated USDA supply demand table with this acreage report. We'll get that in the July WSDA. So by losing 4 million acres of soybeans, you can roughly call that we're losing 200 million bushels of production. And so where's that going to come out of? The uses of soybeans are for crush in the domestic soybean crushers and for foreign exports. Those are the two primary uses. And so that's where you have to think about adjusting. Also, we have our ending stocks, our carryout stocks, and the carry-in can sometimes, if the carry-in is a big enough number, then we can draw down against that because that's extra bushels we have. Well, you can see last year, the carry-out number was not very big. This carry-out number of 200 million bushels is pretty close to what we call the pipeline number. That's how much we have to have available in between new crop and old crop to just keep the whole U.S. transportation system operating. So right now, this adjusted down to 200 million bushels is a very low number. Exports looks like they're going to probably be down. We have not pushed down on crush. Crush margins are still very good, and so we think that crush will still get its share of bushels. The one other category I should mention is imports. And when we saw the basis collapse at the Brazilian ports this year, as the Brazilians harvested their soybeans and sort of overwhelmed their export infrastructure, we actually got some Brazilian soybean imports into the East Coast of the US. And so maybe if these numbers hold for the coming new crop, the 23-24 marketing year, maybe we'll see an increase in imports into the Eastern US. There's a couple of charts I've added this year that I think are really important for us to consider, and that's the seasonality of U.S. whole bean exports. And the next chart we're going to look at is the seasonality of soybean meal exports, because there's a very big contrast. During our harvest window, when we have a lot of beans available, you can see that we get very big monthly export numbers. If you think about China being a 100 million bushel importer, we like to describe for people to just give them a word picture to think about the seasonality difference between North America and South America, that China will require soybeans from the US for 5 months of the year and Brazil 7 months of the year. Going forward, I can see that number shifting to a ratio of maybe 4 months US and 8 months Brazil as our crush expands. But there's still going to be this strong seasonality period of, when we have a lot of bushels to move. After our export move, the big export move in the US is over, there's kind of a basis change for soybeans that's important as the main market after this export period is over becomes the domestic crusher market. And that has an influence also on how farmers in the US think about soybeans versus corn. Here is the soybean meal export monthly volumes. You can see that it's a very steady state. These numbers are going to be going up as we expand our crush in a very big way over the next 3 years. And overall, this is really good for world markets. It's good for US farmers to have, more of a market year round for their beans. And we will have a lot of soybean meal to export at a steady pace year round as this crush improves. So those are my prepared remarks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and turn it back over to you, Jim.
Great, Marty, thank you very much. That was a wonderful overview. I really personally like the way that you looked at the total number of acres that we have, how many we have available, and how they are being used. I think that really helps put into perspective this question about prevent plant, which a lot of people ask about, and those kind of things. So it looks like the U.S. is being, my takeaway from what you presented was the U.S. is being productive in terms of utilizing all those acres. It was just this year, and one of my 4 C's was the conflict, and maybe the conflict did have some impact on our cropping situation because of the wheat. Maybe a few more acres went to wheat. But I do want to, I want to ask you with this, and you alluded to it a little bit, but I just want to ask a little, because this was a surprise to the market, and I think we looked at the average trade guesses, and what came out last Friday was quite a bit different than those. Do we see this? Do you think there's a good chance we see something like this swing back next year, or even in their next report? How do you look at that? This surprise? Oftentimes surprises kind of come back to us. What do you think about that?
I don't think we'll see any kind of a snapback in the next few reports. I think this number will hold for this crop. So then let's talk about, can we snap back next year? Mother Nature always gives us a surprise. 4 years ago, when we had 18 million acres of prevented plant, that has not occurred in modern times. That was a huge number. That was a big surprise. Having absolutely perfect planting weather this year is really kind of surprised when you look at how much prevented plant we've had. So I don't think we're going to get perfect planting weather again next year, and we'll have a more normal, relationship between corn and bean acres likely next year. Also, as the crush increases in the US, we will be building our carry market for soybeans, because the domestic crushers need to have prices in storage and incentives to farmers that hold soybeans to keep those for year-round crush. Sure. So that will be, over the next few years, we're adding a lot of crush capacity, and that will make domestic prices firmer and basis better for soybeans in the US.
Well, that's an interesting thing to be thinking about for the future, because certainly we are seeing this shift with a little more crush capacity coming to the United States. So, Marty, let's talk about, and I know this is hard to predict, but what do you think with the weather situation that we have seen? Do you have any opinion on, and then again, the shift we saw in these soybean acres? Do you think that weather, the weather factors that we're playing in, and we'll get into talking about our farmers too, but do you think we've seen this little drop in acres? Does that make us more or less susceptible to weather issues, or the same?
I think our weather risk is the same, irregardless of whether we had good planting weather, that gave us, this interesting relationship between total corn and bean acres versus, what I would say normal planting weather, where maybe we got, a couple million more acres of soybeans. The beginning of this season has been very dry, but the last week we've had a lot of moisture over a very large area. So it's going to be very interesting going forward here. You're going to hear a lot of people saying that crop conditions are improving. So we're going to have to divine, are the crop conditions actually improving, or are they just stabilizing? Because it was so dry to start the year, we really don't know the impact of that. And that'll be a key thing to watch for the July WASDE, and particularly when we get the August objective yield survey. for the WASD in August.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I was going to ask you one last question before we go to our farmer panel. What are the key things you look for in the July WASD and then the August WASD? You just touched on those, but come back on that just so people in the audience kind of know where to focus their thoughts, because each of these WASDs kind of has their own key factor to look at.
So it's going to be interesting to look at this year. It's so you're catching me a little bit off guard, because at PRX we're fundamental analysts and not market risk managers. I talked with many people at John Stewart and Associates to help me prepare for today, because I knew there would be a lot of risk management issues arising from this crop report. Risk management is going to be a really key issue through the next two WASDs. And so the best thing I could say is, really be involved with your risk management team and the professionals you work with, because in the war in Ukraine, I want to remind people there's 60 million acres in a normal year of oil seeds in the Black Sea region. And we don't know how much of those we've lost, but the 23-24 marketing year is going to be a much bigger impact than we've seen in the last two marketing years with respect to the war. So it's going to be a challenging year to get everybody's oilseed needs met in 23-24.
Okay, well, plenty of things to pay attention to. Okay, folks, we're going to be back a little later with Marty, and he's going to take then some of the questions from the audience. So make sure you're typing those into the Q&A box. In the meantime, I am very happy to be now going to be joined by a couple of U.S. farmers. So first up is Mr. Stan Bourne. Stan is a soybean farmer from Lovington, Illinois, and he's also a member of the American Soybean Association Board and the USEC Board, and he happens to be our chairman this year. So Stan, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here, and thank you everyone for joining.
Great, thank you. And now let me introduce Mike McCraney. Mike is a fourth generation farmer from Claremont, South Dakota. And Mike is on the board of directors of the United Soybean Board and also on our USEC board. So Mike, welcome to you.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be here.
Great, thank you. And thanks for joining us on this 4th of July weekend here in the United States. So I'm going to ask you each to tell us just a little bit about your farm, what makes it unique, kind of your family family situation with regard to your farm. So over to you. Let's start with you, Stan.
Thank you, Jim. I have the good fortune of being able to farm in central Illinois. Illinois happens to be the largest soybean producing state in the U.S. Overall, we produce about 15% of all of the U.S. stocks. And the reason for that is we were just very fortunate with the way the glaciers treated us. Our land is highly productive. My farm typically raises soybeans that are about 70 bushels per acre. On a typical year, that's about 4.7 metric tons per hectare. Which is significantly more than the national average. So we're really fortunate in our area with the soils that we have. My particular farm, I actually began farming just about 12 years ago. I grew up on a farm, but then had a career in industry before coming back to the farm. And so my wife and I operate our soybean and corn operation there in central Illinois. It's a small operation that we can handle ourselves. And we're, as I said, we're very fortunate to be operating in the area that we are. As I've said, I've been at it for about 12 years, having come back from industry and witnessed a lot of change from the time that I left farming to when I come back. And it's exciting to be part of the food industry and supplying high protein products for people's use.
Great. Thank you so much, Stan. Thanks for that overview. Mike, how about you? Tell us a little about your farm and what makes it a unique operation.
Okay, Jim, I'm farming in the northeast part of South Dakota. I am a fourth generation farmer, and I farm with my wife, Monica, and our two sons, Matthew and Mitchell. We farm about 5,100 acres, and we try to do half corn and half soybeans. Something unique about myself and probably my wife, I did not grow up in South Dakota. I grew up on a small ranch in Montana. And after I finished school, my grandparents had a small farm in northeast South Dakota, and I started farming that property with, I had 160 acres and grew it from there. My wife also did not grow up in South Dakota. She grew up in a large city in Washington State. And another thing that's probably unique about us is my wife farms her own farm. I farm my own farm, and our two sons now are farming their own farm. So we all farm independently.
Lots of interesting stories. I'm sure the competition, knowing you and your family, I think there might be a little competition there between all the entities.
Well, one little side note there, my wife does the best job of marketing.
Well, maybe she'll let you in on her secrets.
I think so.
Yeah. So let me just ask the question, everybody's watching the weather in the United States very closely. What's happening? Could you just tell us a little about how the weather's evolved in your area? Because we're fortunate to have two different, pretty distinct areas covered by the two of you. So Stan, back to you, and let's talk about weather.
Yeah, well, so Jim, it's much like what Marty had alluded to. We had perfect planting conditions. About the 10th of April, the dust was flying. People were really rolling, and there was a tremendous amount of both soybeans and corn that got put into the ground. We did have, following that week, a bit of cold weather that gave us some pause. And in fact, I waited an additional week. I waited till the week of the 17th of April before beginning planting. But regardless of that little delay, the ground temps stayed pretty warm. Emergence was very good. Had both soybeans and corn come out of the ground very evenly and off to a great start. We got some nice showers early in May. But throughout the month, we ended up with about half of the precipitation that we would normally expect. So by the end of May, it started to get a little bit dry. And so it just has kind of slowed down crop progress. Now, on the corn, it really didn't give us too much concern, because when the corn is small in that V3 to V6 stage, it doesn't take a lot of water. But as we got into June, both the corn and the beans really needed a drink. And we finally are getting some relief now, just at the end of June, 1st of July, to where we're getting some good rains. And I think it's really protecting the crop at this point. But off to a good start. I think there's been some of the top end that we've lost on both the soybean and corn crop. But we sure are thankful to have good precipitation now that will carry us on and get us well into the month of July.
Well, great. Thanks for that overview of what's happened so far with your crop, Stan. And Mike, can you tell us about what's been happening in North Dakota, or excuse me, South Dakota?
There you go.
Or,
don't make that mistake.
No, I'm sorry.
So my situation is a lot different than Stan's. We had the third most snow that on record for our winter, and that's just probably the northern third of South Dakota. Though that snow belt went into North Dakota. So what did that cause us? That caused us to have a real late snow melt. Our snow did not leave until probably we were well into the first part of May before our snow was starting to give us some bare fields. We did not start planting any crops until the 15th of May. It started out, generally it went from winter to, we had 15 minutes of spring, it seemed like, and then we went into summer. And that heat stayed. We had no precipitation whatsoever until we got into the latter part. Oh no, we were past June 10th before we started getting any showers at all. our corn and soybeans, the corn went in the ground very, very well. We had no trouble with the stands on the corn, but because we turned off dry, our topsoil dried out so bad, we had a hard time hitting moisture with our soybeans. So we have some areas where we have some problems with our stands. We planted soybeans right up till the 10th of June, which is the final plant date for crop insurance. We do not have as many prevent plant acres as we did last year. In fact, we probably have, I don't even know the percentage right now, but not a lot.
Okay, so in the end, I think I've heard both of you describe a situation where you've had some good things, bad things, but you both seem to be feeling okay about your crop at this point. Is that a fair statement? So let me ask another question, because I'm sure it's of interest to people who are listening to us around the world. All this volatility in prices, all of this sort of thing, how do you market your crop? How do you stay on top of that? And do you have much left of your old crop, and are you getting some of your new crop marketed? Stan, let's start with you.
Yeah, so thank you, Jim. So as far as old crop, take that question first. Sold out, both corn and soybeans, actually sold out last fall. And as far as the marketing strategy, I usually like to try to forward contract about a third of my crop, maybe even before it's planted. I usually start making some sales in February, March, and then maybe into May. This year I didn't. And in fact, I made my first sale just the other day after the WASDE report, when beans ran up a little bit. And I've got about, currently of my new crop beans, I've got about 15 to 17% on the board. Corn, I've got nothing. And the reason is I just, it just doesn't look too attractive at this point. I mean, these things always cycle. We've had high commodity prices, which draws up the cost of our inputs. In the case of corn, it's all about the fertilizer. In the case of soybeans, it's all about crop protectants. And as far as the percentage of cost other than land costs. And those things, they're kind of like rockets and feathers. They go up like a rocket and they come down like feathers. So they get a little bit out of synchronization. So because those costs are still up a little bit, I'm still waiting on better pricing on corn. But so far this year, all old crop gone, new crop about 15% on soybeans, 0% on corn.
Great, thanks, Stan. It sounds like it's something you watch every day. Sounds like. Mike.
Okay, here's my report for our marketing. Myself, I'll start with me. I am 100% sold out on corn of last year, and I have no soybeans left, so I'm kind of like Stan there. My wife, who is usually the best marketer, she's sold out of last year's soybeans, better than all of us. But she still got a few bushels of corn left. Not a lot, but probably I'd say maybe less than 10%. The two sons, they're sold out on corn and sold out on soybeans as well. Now moving into new crop, I think myself, my wife, and one son has 25% new crop sold, and the other son has 50% of his soybean sold. So that's kind of the way we are. Corn, nobody has any corn sold.
Okay, well, that's something to be watching then. All right. Well, I think our time continues to go by here. It's going faster than we would like it to. But I want to get back to one. I'm going to give you a final question here. So, and I think this is something really important because you both alluded to change over the time that you've been farming and changes that you have seen. And I want to talk a little bit about, maybe you could just talk your expectations for crop productivity, the use of technology, these innovative things that we have coming. If we were sitting here 5 or 10 years from now, just give us a real quick snapshot of what you look to be different and what you're looking for in terms of those changes. And I do have to ask you each just a couple minutes each on this question, please.
Yeah, so Jim, I'd address that quickly. I think genetics are going to continue to deliver new benefits for us. There's a lot of technology in the pipeline as it relates to corn specifically, but also for soy that are going to benefit us. And then I believe biologicals are going to be another element to try to help free up some of that chemistry in the soil in our chemistry set and help us in a sustainable fashion be able to release more of those nutrients and get them into the plant so that we can grow a productive crop and get those nutrients to you so you can get them into your end uses. So those are the two areas that I expect to see benefits, at least to my farm, would be through genetics and also through biologicals.
Okay, so, but still room for improvement to come.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Mike?
Okay, I think probably everything that Stan said, I agree with. I think we're going to head down that improvements in genetics and everything like that. Something that I think, and I keep telling my sons this, what they will see, I won't see it, but I see a time when they will not even be in a combine or a tractor. Everything that they will have, they'll be able to run multiple units at one time. A lot of that's going to happen because of labor shortages that we see on our farms. So that's probably a big change I think will happen. Other than that, I hope to see a lot of improvement in our handling of things from farm to the markets.
Jim, if we got just a second,
Yeah.
I'd add one other thing that,
Please.
and it's already coming, and that's the use of machine learning and AI, particularly in the control of some of our very expensive inputs. And I would say when in soybeans, again, crop protectants, I spend a lot of money killing weeds, killing bugs, and getting rid of fungi and, protecting that crop. And there's a lot of new technology that's some of it's already here, but I think we'll see more of that for better utilization of those expensive inputs. And it's got a great sustainability play because it just minimizes the use of those products and puts them just where you need them. So I think that's another bit of technology that's going to further mature and help all of us.
I certainly agree with you, Stan. I think that variable rate technology and being able to really smartly apply the plant protective tools and the fertilizer and the seed. I'm not out there doing it every day like you guys are, but it just seems to make so much sense when I hear people explain that. And what we all think about AI as possibly a threat to the future. Man, I think it is an opportunity to be able to just continue to, if one of the definitions of sustainability is doing more with less, I really think that technology is a great way to help us to be able to do that. Unfortunately, our time is up with the two of you. Thank you so much for making yourselves available today, sharing your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge with us. Thank you. And I wish you a happy and safe 4th of July holiday coming up. And again, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks everyone for your business.
Thanks, Stan. Thanks, Mike. All right, now we're back with Marty, and we've got some questions coming in from around the world. Marty, I tell you, people, you've really piqued everybody's interest, and we've just got a little bit of time here. We're going to try and knock through some of these questions. One of the first ones has to do with yield, and I think it's I've got to put together a few questions that I've seen. People are saying that we hear the crop's under stress, the yield scores, the productivity scores, the condition scores are not good. Will that mean the WASDE is going to bring down yields? What do you think about yields? Can you give us a little feeling for that?
So at the beginning of the year, of the calendar year, when we start getting reports from USDA and new crop, it's all based on trend yields. And for the last month, everybody knows that the weather has not been supporting a trend yield. Traditionally, we would expect USDA to adjust the yield in the August report. That's when they get the objective yield survey completed, for conditions as of August 1st. It'll be interesting to see if there's an adjustment to the yield or not in the July report. I I don't know if they're going to do that or not. We'll have to wait and see, but it's not very far off.
Right, it's coming right up. Okay, well, good. Well, hopefully that gives people at least something to be thinking about, because I know that's what everybody else is watching now that they have these acreage numbers. So a couple more questions about, and this really gets a little bit into input costs. And is there some other reason that people planted more corn rather than beans based upon the numbers that came out on Friday? That seems to be kind of the direction that there was this shift. Was it fertilizer cost or something like that? Or do you think that was a part of it, Marty?
Well, all input costs are up a lot in the US. When we do our gross revenue analysis, that's part of our 10-year projection in our blue sky model, every October, we get new data from the Census of Agriculture on input costs. And last October, the input costs for the whole corn and soybean complex in the US went up $10 billion. So that's a really big number. So input costs are real. But I would say going back to the question, what other factor caused this? Why when farmers get perfect planting weather, why do they prefer to plant more corn? And in the US, we have 3 markets for corn. You have the export market, you have the domestic crush market for ethanol and fructose and other things, and you have livestock. For soybeans, you only have 2 markets. It's exports and the local crush. And when I showed the chart of the seasonality of whole bean exports, and so when that market turns off and the only market is crush, and these crushers are large entities. They consume all the beans from maybe a 10-county area around each crusher. So they're big influencers, and without having choice, even with an ethanol plant, you only need a few counties for each ethanol plant. So farmers always have more choice just in between multiple ethanol plants. So the basis in corn is more stable and more predictable than it is today with soybeans. And so that's another factor is, how the basis behaves or how consistent the basis is that makes farmers prefer to plant corn when they have the opportunity.
Interesting. And that's a very interesting perspective. Thank you, Marty, for sharing that. We get a question about, and this maybe is a little bit out of your normal day-to-day stuff, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts about, we've heard a lot about La Nina and now the shift to an El Nino. When you hear about those things, do you think they're significant factors for our U.S. cropping production systems? Or do you kind of say, well, who knows? What do you think?
So our climate scientists has coached us that when we get a warm pool of water in the Eastern Pacific, south of Alaska, up off of the Canadian coast there, a few years back, we had something they were calling the blob. It was a big pool of warm water. So what's going on in the Northern Pacific has a direct impact on the jet stream and the direction that storms flow across the production areas of the US. So these big weather patterns are very important, but they're hard to understand. La Ninas for the last 30 years, they come and go, and they typically last a year, and they weren't near as devastating as the La Nina we just had that lasted 3 years and really impacted South American production, particularly in Argentina. So yes, they're important. Do we understand them well enough to predict what's actually going to happen? No, we don't. So they give us some indications that help people, do their risk management, but they're not definitive. Our climate scientist tells us all the time, there's no skill in any weather forecast beyond 10 days.
Well, interesting. Well, you know, Marty, I am afraid we are up to, we've run out of time. And I am, so thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us tonight. I know that the people around the world have appreciated you sharing your insights and putting it into a very practical perspective about looking at the total pool of acres and kind of thinking about what maybe happened with the shift that caught people off guard on Friday, but trying to put that into a very understandable way. I think you did a magnificent job of that. And then your comment, it's going to stick with me about the blob off the west coast of the US with this pool of warm water and all the other things you shared with us. So thank you so much. And as always, we appreciate you sharing your expertise and look forward to the next time we can have you participating in one of our events. Thank you, Marty.
You're very welcome, Jim. Take care. Happy 4th.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you. All right, folks, I'm just going to kind of wrap up here really quickly and thank you all for spending your time with us. We hope that the information that's been presented has been insightful and gives you something that you can take away and use in providing inputs to your business by making decisions. And I think that, you know, I come away after hearing our farmers and hearing from Marty, and I continue to be very optimistic about this year's soy crop. And that we're going to be able to meet the needs of international customers and that our industry will continue to be a very important supplier and part of your opportunities to purchase key raw materials. Regardless of where you are in this feed and food value chain, I invite you to continue to think about the sustainability of US soy. And if that's something that's of importance to your customers around the world, I know I hear more and more about it no matter where I am. So please talk with our people, our team, and let us know how we can help you with that as well. If you have further questions or want information on growing conditions, marketing, any kind of things that we could help you with, please reach out to our USEC team members wherever you are in the world. And once again, we thank you for the opportunity to collaborate. We thank you for the trust that you place in US soy in terms of it being an ingredient. We thank you for the business that you've had with US soy over the years, and we look forward to being a great partner for many years to come. So again, thank you very much for your time today. Look forward to seeing you on the next one of these events. Take care.